We've talked about Apple's moves with AI in the past, but they seem to be making a big advance, teaming up with Google Cloud and Nvidia to try and bring AI for the enterprise. So this is the expansion of the private cloud compute infrastructure that was announced at WWDC 2026. And it's a partnership that will offload intensive Apple intelligent workloads like complex reasoning and agentic tools to Google servers, using, of course, NVIDIA's confidential computing GPUs. And while the backend power is scaling up significantly, Apple's strict data privacy standards remain intact, making the upgrade highly appealing to enterprise IT leaders that really do want strong control on data. And of course, we're an Apple shop. We must be using lots of intelligence.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, listeners, of the rundown know how intelligent Al and I are on a regular basis. But what's important here is that Apple realizes that they do not have the resources to kind of provide for the rush that they're going to get. I mean, let's be honest, we've been talking about new Siri for at least a year, if not more than that. And when you look at some of the features that are being talked about in the iOS 27 release, I was literally just reading up on some of them right before we were recording. There's a lot of additional context that is going to be provided by Siri, which means there's a lot more computing power that's going to be needed for that. And one of the things that has been talked about is that the only iPhones today that can run the full featured on-device model are the iPhone 17 Pro and the iPhone 17 Air. Not even the iPhone 17 has the power to run the full featured model. And you'll know you have that one because you can customize Siri's voice in the new setup. But that means that for the people who are using the 15, the 16, the 17, and probably the 18, not the Pro model, that might come out, but let's be fair, we know it's coming out. They're going to need to run all of this somewhere. And that's what this partnership with Google talks about. What's important, though, is that this is running Apple's foundational model in the cloud. This is not running a Gemini model, because that was one of the rumors that we heard before WWDC this year, was that we were going to be running a Gemini model on device. And that, I think, gave people a little bit of pause, because we're now seeing a lot of pushback on some of these models. One of the things I saw recently is that Google's Gemini model is actually keeping some of your code snippets a lot longer than the other competing models. And if you know enterprises, they really don't like it when their special property gets held on to longer than it needs to. So I think that maybe running these models in a confidential compute setup in Google Cloud, but it's still Apple's model, is the way that they're going to win over the enterprise. Look, I'm not going to pretend for an instant that Apple is going to knock off OpenAI and Anthropic and Google when this launches, which we're expecting to happen sometime in September. But I'll tell you that from an average daily user count, they're going to be streaming a lot of data into Google's servers. And that is going to kind of change the balance of power in the market from a consumer versus enterprise market. And it might just cause some of those enterprise customers to say, well, if I'm using Apple at home, why shouldn't I be using Apple when I'm at work?